Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that are out for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a brand strategy and digital marketing specialist, no other than Mr. Nicholas Kuhne.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous, fabulous like you, Mr. Nicholas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Well, I'm a South African-born brand strategist, podcast host, and startup storyteller with a knack of bringing entrepreneurial stories and compelling content to people who are trying to learn about marketing and branding in this digital age. I'm currently based in Oslo, in Norway, and I've worked for the likes of MTV, Comedy Central, Nando's, Interbrand, and I've had my own branding business since 2013. And my specialization really is focusing on emerging markets and helping emerging market brands compete against the big international boys.
Mr. Nicholas Kuhne, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. What are the key differences between building brands in Africa versus Asia?
Okay, now that's quite a tough one, but there are a whole bunch of similarities because, as I mentioned, when I said I try and help build emerging market brands, we've got all of us know the international guys like Unilever, Procter and Gamble, Duracell, Ford, Mercedes-Benz, all of these big brands. But what I've been trying to do is help local businesses in Africa and Asia compete against these businesses. Otherwise, they'll just be taken over, and then the whole world looks the same. Everywhere has got a KFC, everywhere has got a McDonald's, everywhere has got a Walmart or something very similar to that. So we want to try and build brands that are relevant to the local market and that retain their local character. Now, when we look about the difference between Africa and Asia, in about 20 years ago, there was this relatively similar because they were both sort of really emerging markets. But what we're seeing now is that Asia has taken off slightly faster than the African continent. And part of this is obviously due to political instability and political nonsense that's happened in Africa. And we can look at sort of Asian countries that are doing the same thing, which is Myanmar or Burma, which you could see as almost the most African of the Asian nations. And what the main difference is between these two continents, or let's have a look at more the similarities between the two of them. A lot of the businesses are family owned or generational businesses. So you've got somebody who started a small store, grew out into the surrounding areas, grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden they're the big boys in town. And when the markets opened up, in came Unilever, in came Procter and Gamble, in came these international brands and ate all their lunch. So a lot of these Asian and African countries had local grown businesses that were either bought out by these big companies or put out of business. So that is the major challenge for brands in these markets, because typically the local brands in the olden days, when I say olden days, 20, 30 years ago, were seen as not as high quality, not as good, not as aspirational as these international brands that came in. But what we're seeing now in these two very different markets is that people are looking to support local businesses. They are looking at the heritage of their country and the businesses that they grew up with, and are starting to go back to those brands. And especially when we have a look at tariffs coming from the US and from China, and China dumping products, etc. People are wanting to support local businesses. They're wanting to support local brands and still have the luxury of being able to have the international brands when they want them.
Indeed, Mr. Nicholas. How do cultural nuances influence branding strategies in these regions?
So when we look at branding, now branding is not a new concept. Branding has been around for a couple of thousand years. I've got a couple of examples of sort of Greek brands and Roman brands and Egyptian brands from thousands of years ago, where you could get an amphora of olive oil or wine coming from Syria or from Italy, and they'd be stamped with the farm or the person who created that particular product. So branding is not necessarily a new thing. When it comes to cultural nuances, however, I've worked in countries like Nigeria, Bangladesh, Malaysia. So let's just take those three. But all three of those have got very large Muslim populations. Now, when you're bringing in an international or Western brand into those countries, and you don't understand, coming from a Western mindset, that the Muslim mindset or the local mindset is slightly more conservative and traditional, when you come with your funny campaigns or your edgy campaigns or certain messaging or images that are not acceptable in those countries, you can cause your brand quite a lot of damage. So in Nigeria and Malaysia, for example, you've got quite mixed countries. So in Nigeria, 50% Muslim, 50% Christian, but all of them are quite aware of, are quite traditional and are cognizant of the cultural differences between the two and are quite sensitive to those cultural differences. When we go to Malaysia, we've got Chinese, we've got Indian, we've got Malay, you've got a teeny weeny minority of Westerners like myself who lived in Malaysia for years. And during the different seasons of the year, specifically in Malaysia, brands and businesses will have specific messaging and specific campaigns aimed at the different target markets in order to make everyone feel included, but not to the exclusion of the majority. For example, in Malaysia, the Malays, making sure that they are most looked after. So it's business. You're not there as a charitable organization. You need to make money. You need to make sure that you are selling to the majority of the population. So you've got to be culturally sensitive and understand that your brand needs to be different or be adapted to that country in a specific way. If you look in Thailand, the KFC have rice with their chicken. You won't find rice in the US, for example, with your fried chicken. So in Thailand and in countries like that, you would have adjustments in the actual base product. The Big Mac or their main product, the fried chicken or the Big Mac, stays the same, but then they'll bring in additional items. And another example is the Kit Kat, which I'm sure, Daniel, you've enjoyed a Kit Kat or two in your life, and you've seen that fantastic campaign from Nestle, which is the green tea Kit Kat. Have you ever tried that?
No, not yet.
No. Okay. Well, anyway, in Japan, which is obviously very different to the US, the Kit Kats are per region in Japan. There's a different flavor Kit Kat, and the green tea one just happened to take off, and it was something that people would take back overseas because it's so outrageous and so different. So it's okay for a brand to adapt itself and become part of the local culture, because a lot of brands that you grew up with that you thought were perhaps from your home country are actually from out of the country, but they've made such an effort and they've become so part of your life that you think, wow, this product is from South Africa. So there are a whole bunch of products that I thought were South African, and then I went around the rest of the world and the same products were there, but with slightly different flavors or fragrances, etc. So brands are very adaptable and have to be adaptable because they're selling to people, not to robots.
Mr. Nicholas, what are some common misconceptions global companies have about branding in Africa and Asia?
Well, I think I've touched on quite a few of them there. In terms of misconceptions, well, let's have a look at it. The reason, when we move into countries like, continents like Africa and Asia, the purchasing power is slightly lower, and the importance of brands becomes even more visible. Because let's just take, for example, you are a a woman working at a factory and you're earning a very low wage. You go to the store and you've got an option of two types of soap or two types of washing powder. One is from a no-name supplier from China, for example, and one is from Unilever, and it's Surf. You know, and the Surf product is 20% or 30% more expensive than the brand you haven't heard of before. One day you try that because you've got a little money. You think, let me try that cheap product. You take it home, burns your hands, burns your clothes, and then your clothes are ruined. So you've made that 20% saving that you've made has actually damaged your health and has damaged your product. If you are buying something like a Unilever product, which is tested, and you can go back to Unilever and say there's a problem, that 20% value all of a sudden becomes much more palatable, because you know that even though I'm spending a little bit more on this brand, I know where it's from, I know it's going to do what it says, and I know that if anything happens, I've got some recourse back to the brand. So the importance of brands is actually highlighted in emerging markets, because the cost of making a mistake with a purchase is so much higher. So for me, that's one of the big motivations for building brands in emerging markets, is that people have got less disposable income. They can't afford to make mistakes, and they will pay a premium for a branded product over a no-name product. And I think that's very important to consider.
Let's talk about the strategy or strategic development, Mr. Nicholas. What factors must be prioritized when developing a brand strategy in emerging markets?
Well, people pay me lots of money for that, Daniel, so I could tell you now. I think the core thing is understanding the local market. And if I was a brand, for example, if I was a predatory brand going into these markets, I'd have a look at what are the local customs, who are the big competitors, what are the local nuances in terms of, perhaps, let's just take the washing powder example. Perhaps the water quality is different, so the formulation might need to change for that market. So you can't just take your product that works with wonderful Norwegian fjord water, which is crystal clear, tastes delicious, and has got no chemicals, and compare that to Ganges water if you're going to India, for example. So it's very important that you understand the differences in how your product is going to solve a problem. You need to obviously understand your market. Very often you need to have differential or differentiated pricing going into an emerging market, because you might need to consider things like, can they afford your product? What kind of discount or what kind of pricing level can you go in at? So you'll notice that in certain countries, products are cheaper, which is why they don't allow grey imports or imports from that country to another country, because there's that price arbitrage that you can get. So it's important to localize it as well. So make sure you localize it if you want to localize it, if you're not a premium brand. So if you look at Prada and Louis Vuitton, you're not going to localize that to the market. But if you are a soft drink, or you are a confectionery or snack producer, you need to go in there with a slightly different mindset and say, are the tastes going to be suitable for this market? What is spicy in Norway is not going to be spicy in Bangladesh, for example. So I remember when working at Nando's, we had to create an extra level of spice when we went to Malaysia and we went to Pakistan and India, because it just wasn't hot enough for the local market. So they made us create a new flavor that was even hotter, and it did particularly well. So those are some of the elements. And then, as I mentioned, you can't forget the cultural aspect. So make sure you don't annoy your local customers by not being sensitive to cultural norms in those countries.
Very well said. Nicholas, very well said.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, Daniel.
How important is the community engagement in building trust for new brands?
Well, I mean, we all know about social media. So social media is all about being social and building communities. Again, you can't sell to space. You need to sell to people. So building a community of, and let's just break it down quickly. You need to understand where your market is. Obviously, what is the size of this market? Who are the heavy users? Who are the ones who are going to influence other people to use your product? And who are those that are going to be brand ambassadors? So if we go through that sort of influencer cycle, you want to find, that's why building loyalty programs and having a few ambassadors at the beginning of a campaign or beginning of going into a new country is super important. So obviously I can't overestimate the importance of that.
Mr. Nicholas, let's talk about the market challenges. What are the biggest barriers to brand recognition in rural or undeserved areas?
If we look, I'm taking this of my hat as an international brand coming into a country. So if I come in with my brand and my packaging with English, it is going to suffer in countries where people don't speak English. This is why we see in all over the world that Coca-Cola isn't seen as Coca-Cola in all of these countries. So in Thailand, in China, and even Ethiopia, it is done in the local script, and the descriptors are done in the local script as well. There are some issues with this. We all know about, well, hopefully if you've been following branding, how Coca-Cola mistranslated their name into Chinese by doing it phonetically, and it was Coca-Cola, which sounded like bite, well, which translates directly into bite the wax tadpole. So there's a whole bunch of areas like that you might have issues with, again, when you don't lean on local understanding and make sure you bring in local experts. So I would suggest for anyone going into new countries, make sure you go to local experts. Don't think I'm from an international company and I've worked overseas and I know everything. You will never understand local nuances like a local. So I would definitely recommend that.
How do counterfeit products or brand imitations affect brand integrity in these markets?
Companies like Louis Vuitton, and we even mentioned companies like Unilever, have departments that look out for counterfeits. So I've got some wonderful photos from my time in Nigeria where there were the tuk-tuks or the those three-wheeler taxis which were wrapped in Louis Vuitton packaging. You can't stop that because that is an expression. People are it's aspirational. They want to live that LV life. But obviously, let's just look at why counterfeits are dangerous. You don't just get counterfeits in Louis Vuitton bags and Hermes bags. You get it in pharmaceuticals. You get it in eggs. You get it in a variety of other products. So one of the reasons that large organizations are very concerned about counterfeits is because imagine you buy counterfeit drugs and somebody buys that and they get ill or they die. That can impact not only from a legal perspective, but also the brand damage of somebody saying, well, I used this product and it killed my wife or my dog or my elbow fell off, something like that. That is really bad for the brand. So that's on the physical counterfeit side. There's also counterfeiting when it comes to your online presence, which is why it's very important to make sure that you own and take very good care of your digital assets. So your social media channels, your website. So you've got to have, you've got my Wunderbrand, which is my brand agency. I've got wunderbrand.com, wunderbrand.no, wunderbrand.co.za, multitudes of Wunderbrands, because I had an issue where a company in Singapore called themselves wunderbrand.com.sg, and I've been getting a whole bunch of emails for people wanting to get jobs as cashiers, because this was a company that had owned 2 7-Elevens, and they took a name that they thought was nice because it obviously seen Wunderbrand and used that for themselves. And unfortunately, it's Singapore. It's expensive for me to sue them, but I engaged with them directly and asked them to take the website down. But when you're an LV, when you're an iPhone, when you're a bank, etc., there are more expensive mistakes that can be done with counterfeiting and by losing your brand IP online, which is a big issue. Anyone who's dealt with fraud and claims like that and people claiming to be their business will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mr. Nicholas, what will be your short-term and long-term goals as a brand strategy as well as a digital marketing specialist?
For myself or for everyone else?
For you, for yourself.
For me. Well, I am, if anyone listens to my podcast From Startup to Wunderbrand, they will know that I speak about two things. It is about consistency and it is about the customer journey. And I'm a big fan of the customer journey because if you understand the customer journey for your business, it will solve the majority of your marketing problems. It will help you. It's basically a guide for what you need to do to take people from the beginning of the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. So my focus going into 25, 26 is focusing more on supporting people who want to build out their customer journeys correctly and figure out where the gaps are. And the second side is I've got an exciting new product, which is a brand strength product, which is for companies that are sort of stuck or are looking to, how do I take myself from being a mid-level company to a international or an actual brand? I've got a process that I take folks through to explain each of those steps and what you need to do. So I don't do the work myself. You have to do it, but I explain the process and I give you all the tools. So for me, that's what I'm looking for the next year or so. And I'm nearly on 200 episodes, so I think I'm going to keep focusing on my podcast. And I'm sure, Daniel, you've got hundreds of episodes as well, so you know how much work is involved in doing these podcasts. So wish me luck.
Yes, indeed. And good luck to your goals, Mr. Nicholas. So what will be advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Who want to be like me? Well, being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. So if you've got an opportunity to make a big impact on a business from the inside, do that. But if you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, you love suffering, but you also love the excitement of the rush of closing deals, go and become an entrepreneur. So all I can say is I wish any of you choosing either of those paths the very best for 2025.
Well, thank you for your advice, Mr. Nicholas. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast because my abstract essay is already in the 5th season, people, 5th season, and my abstract poetry in the 2nd season, and of course, Book 101 review in its 5th season too, and Comedy 101 in the 2nd season, and Food 101 in its 5th season as well. Geography 101 in the 3rd season, Love Letters as well, and my baby podcast Mental Health 101, and my Movie 101 review in its 3rd season, as well as my Music 101 and Science 101 in its 1st season, and Sex 101 in its 2nd season. So please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Mr. Nicholas, looking ahead, what trends do you predict will shape the future of branding in these regions, and why?
I'm a big proponent of pushing personal branding. So I would ask people who are thinking about building brands to make sure that you go inward a little bit, because we are going into an era where we've got all these big brands that I mentioned, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Nestle, etc. But the world is getting a little bit smaller in terms of people are looking for micro brands. They're looking for brands that are really solving a problem that is just for them. So that micro personalization, and it's all available now. You can do that with support from AI. But the important thing to consider is, do you understand yourself, and do you have a very strong concept of what your brand is? So I would recommend that you focus on your personal brand, because people are more interested in seeing people behind the brand than just a lovely logo and pretty colors and a brand statement. So I would focus on building up your own personal brand as the focus.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Nicholas Kuhne. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge as well as your podcast to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your business as well as your podcast itself?
Yeah, you can find all information that you need from me on kuhne.no, that's kuhne.no, or my podcast From Startup to Wunderbrand, and my branding business. If you'd like to understand a little bit more about customer journeys and building emerging market brands, that is wunderbrand.com with a W, wunderbrand.com. And thank you again, Daniel. Some great questions.
You are most welcome, Mr. Nicholas. Let's support Mr. Nicholas Kuhne, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering brand to come, more and more and more empowering episodes of Wonder Brand to come. So, Mr. Nicholas, thank you so much for your time. More to come, people. See you soon.